Today, Live March 16, 2021. Live World News headlines. Jason Miller. Trump said Meghan was no good. Kushner calls Biden move on Iran smart. New York sheriff violated law by flying Trump flag from boat while on duty. Forget Trump's behavior, let's focus on the GOP and America's future. Magazine depicts Queen Elizabeth kneeling on Meghan's neck in reference to royal scandal over race. US FAA extending zero-tolerance unruly air passenger policy. Biden emphasizes local leadership over Trump in persuading hesitant Republicans on vaccine. Policemen, firemen among over 400 Myanmar nationals seeking shelter in India. Xinjiang forced labor complex is growing. President Biden should work with Congress to curb it. North Korea warns new U.S. administration if it wants peace it must avoid causing a stink. State news agency. Britain targets influence in Indo-Pacific as counterweight to China. Bolsonaro readies health minister's swap as Brazil's outbreak worsens. Australia to proceed with AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine despite pause in Europe. Jason Miller. Trump said Meghan was no good. Jason Miller, who served as a senior advisor to former President Trump, said that Trump told him he believed Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, was no good. Deadline reports that Miller shared the remarks while appearing on Stephen Bannon's War Room podcast last week. She's no good, I said it and now everybody is seeing it, Trump said, according to Miller. Piers Morgan is the best, he's the greatest. And they went and tried to cancel him simply because he criticized Meghan Markle. Trump reportedly told Miller to share his remarks to make a little news, but warned him, you realize if you say anything negative about Meghan Markle you get canceled, look at Piers. The former president supposedly told Miller that Trump was on Team Piers. Morgan left Good Morning Britain shortly after he made on-air remarks doubting Meghan's claims of mistreatment and worsening mental health while she was a member of the royal family. He later walked back his comments on her mental health, but has since maintained that he believed the claims she made during an interview with Oprah Winfrey. When reports came out that Meghan had said Trump was divisive and misogynistic in 2019, he told the British tabloid The Sun that he didn't know that she was nasty. Trump later walked back his remarks, saying he was referring to her comments about him as nasty and not the Duchess herself. And after Meghan and Prince Harry made remarks last year that were seen by many as a tacit endorsement of then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, Trump shot back at the couple. As we approach this November, it's vital that we reject hate speech, misinformation and online negativity, Prince Harry said during a video for Time's 100 Most Influential People. I'm not a fan, and I would say this, and she probably has heard that. I wish a lot of luck to Harry because he's going to need it, Trump told reporters when asked about the couple's comments. Forget Trump's behavior, let's focus on the GOP and America's future. Recently, I had the opportunity to interview Representative Tom Rice, RSC, on my syndicated television show. He was one of 10 Republicans in Congress who voted to impeach former President Trump for inciting the January 6 Capitol riots. Since that time, the former president has focused his frustration on calling out Price and other Republican members, such as Liz Cheney, daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney, for their votes to impeach. He named them during his remarks at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC. Trump's main goal in mentioning Republicans such as Price and Cheney is to encourage voters to defeat them. I asked Price why he decided to vote to impeach even though Trump was already out of office. Price said that he believed the former president's attempt to influence legislation through the spread of violence was a violation of the Constitution and, therefore, it could not go unpunished. He said he believes that people must be held accountable for what occurred at the Capitol. Despite wanting to hold Trump accountable for bad behavior, Price said he also wants the former president to help move the Republican Party forward. If Trump wants to put a target on him, so be it, he said, but the focus for Price is on the future of the GOP and on moving the country forward, which I find to be honorable and notable. We can debate whether Price made the right decision, but he did so based on his principles. He is all about, and it's what we should want from our political leaders. Unlike Democrats, many Republicans and conservatives who don't espouse groupthink don't believe that everyone in the party must hold the exact same ideas to avoid excommunication. That's what makes conservatives unique. We believe in the idea of individual thought. Trump is a once-in-a-lifetime figure. You either like him as a politician or you don't. I've interviewed dozens of people on both sides of the coin, including those who were in the former president's crosshairs at one point or another. None of them remained humble or gracious enough to discuss the positives of the Trump presidency, despite their disagreements or the former president's attacks on them. Yet that is what politics is supposed to be about. We can disagree on certain things but acknowledge and recognize the good that someone achieves. Trump has an amazing opportunity to help move forward and unite all Republicans towards a common goal much larger than any one individual. This should include the Republicans who voted to impeach him. I certainly understand his frustration, but, at some point, we must all move on to the greater task at hand, that is, the future of our nation. I can't say whether Price made a good or bad choice. It's not a decision for me to make. I don't know what was in his heart, but I do know that he appears to be a sincere public servant who cares deeply about the needs of the people he represents. He also cares about expanding and growing the Republican Party, which is something the GOP desperately needs now that the Democrats control the House, Senate, and White House. It's time for us all to come together as Americans, Christians and conservatives, to unite against and focus on the bigger battles that lie ahead. Politics has become too personal. It no longer seems to be about the business of governance. That is demoralizing for many people and likely the reason that some Americans have simply tapped out of the process. I'm not sure if Trump, Price, or the other Republican members who voted to impeach him can ever get on the same page, even if they share similar conservative beliefs. And that's okay, I suppose. Be bygones and work to expand conservatism as a philosophy to as many Americans as possible. Magazine depicts Queen Elizabeth kneeling on Meghan's neck in reference to royal scandal over race. French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo is facing backlash over the cover of its latest issue, which depicts Queen Elizabeth II kneeling on the neck of Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, in reference to the death of George Floyd at the hands of police. The front-page cartoon published Saturday shows an evil-looking Elizabeth kneeling on the neck of the Duchess of Sussex under the title "Why Meghan Quit." Meghan is shown saying, "Because I couldn't breathe anymore." The image and phrases are references to the police killing of George Floyd in May. Floyd, a black man, died last year after a Minneapolis police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes during an arrest, in which Floyd's last words were, "I can't breathe." Video of the incident kicked off a racial reckoning in the U.S. and sparked widespread protests against racial injustice and police brutality that reached around the world. The cartoon was the provocative magazine's response to last week's interview Meghan and Prince Harry did with Oprah Winfrey. During the interview, Meghan shared that an unnamed member of the royal family had expressed concerns about the skin color of the couple's baby. The remark was not made by the Queen or her husband, Prince Philip. Meghan also described the loneliness and isolation she felt as a British royal, explaining that at one point she thought, "I just didn't want to be alive anymore." The cartoon was predictably criticized by social media users who called it racist and utterly disgusting, while others defended the magazine's right to publish the cartoon and criticize the Queen. "This is wrong on every level," Halima Begum, the chief executive of Runnymede, a British think tank focused on racial equality, tweeted. Begum said the cover does not push boundaries but demeans the issues and causes offense across the board. The magazine has been published for more than 5 decades and has acquired a reputation for its controversial cartoons. In 2015, the weekly newspaper became the target of a terrorist attack after publishing satirical cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. 2 Muslim brothers opened fire at the magazine's offices in France, killing 12 staffers and injuring several others. U.S. FAA extending zero-tolerance unruly air passenger policy. Washington, the head of the Federal Aviation Administration said on Monday he will indefinitely extend a zero-tolerance policy on unruly air passengers that had been set to expire March 30 in the face of hundreds of reported incidents. FAA Administrator Steve Dixon said in a statement he will extend the policy as we continue to do everything we can to confront the pandemic. The number of cases we're seeing is still far too high, and it tells us urgent action continues to be required. FAA officials said the extension will last at least as long as a federal transportation face mask order remains in effect. The official added that airlines have reported more than 500 unruly passenger cases to the FAA since late December, and to date the FAA has initiated about 20 enforcement actions and is reviewing more than 450 cases. Biden emphasizes local leadership over Trump in persuading hesitant Republicans on vaccine. Washington, U.S. President Joe Biden sounded doubtful on Monday about former President Donald Trump playing a role in helping to persuade hesitant Republicans to get coronavirus vaccine shots. Biden and his team have been trying to figure out how to vaccinate more Republicans, as polls show some supporters of the former president have not wholeheartedly accepted the idea of getting vaccine shots. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Biden said he had discussed the issue with his advisors. "I discussed it with my team and they say the thing that has more impact than any aid to the MAGA folks is what the local doctor, what the local preacher, what the local people in the community say," Biden said. MAGA is the acronym for Trump's signature slogan, "Make America Great Again." Trump has said little to his supporters about getting vaccinated, after quietly getting the vaccine himself in January. "Everybody, go get your shot," he told the Conservative Political Action Conference late last month in Florida. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said Trump could help but did not necessarily expect him to do so.
If former President Trump woke up tomorrow and wanted to be more vocal about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, certainly we'd support that, Psaki said.
Health officials are contacting evangelicals and other conservatives to reach Republicans, she told reporters at her daily briefing. The president's goal is to vaccinate all Americans, not just those who voted for him, Psaki said. We know that we need to meet everyone where they are, and that includes conservatives, and ensure there are trusted messengers who lead the way in those engagements. In a PBS NewsHour/NPR/Marist poll released last week, about half of U.S. men who identified themselves as Republicans said they had no plans to get the vaccine. 81% of Republicans said they would trust their own doctor's advice on a COVID-19 vaccine, Psaki said Monday, and that's one area where the White House is concentrating. The other living former U.S. presidents, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter, are set to appear in 2 public service announcements for the coronavirus vaccine alongside their wives, without Trump. Other president public campaigns on the vaccine, Psaki said Monday.
They did not need an engraved invitation to do so, she added.
Xinjiang forced labor complex is growing. President Biden should work with Congress to curb it. President Biden's pledge on the campaign trail to see to it that America once again stands for human rights is being put to the test. For him to honor his pledge, the president must show the world that he is willing not only to recalibrate relationships with longtime allies but also to reset them, if necessary.
With a mutual understanding that flagrant violations of human rights will be met with a strong response and those responsible will face accountability, even heads of state. It will not be enough for President Biden to simply do better than his predecessor, who consistently downplayed and undermined human rights. He must also work to reverse the damage left in Trump's wake.
One of the biggest challenges for the new president will be confronting Chinese President Xi Jinping over the Chinese government's growing human rights abuses in Hong Kong, Tibet, and Xinjiang. For the last 4 years, U.S.-China policy was confused and driven by political expediency.
Human rights took a backseat to other issues that Donald Trump thought would help him win re-election.
It wasn't just President Trump's indifference or refusal to confront his Chinese counterpart directly.
According to his former national security advisor, Donald Trump, on multiple occasions,
encouraged Xi to keep building internment camps in Xinjiang because he thought it was exactly the right thing to do. It turns out President Xi may have been listening. Government documents and satellite images first reported by BuzzFeed News revealed hundreds of newly constructed prison and internment camps, some big enough to hold tens of thousands of detainees, in China's Xinjiang region, where the Chinese government has detained more than 1 million Uyghurs and members of other Muslim ethnic minorities.
All the camps were constructed within the last 3 years, and many came with factories nearby or built in for detainee labor. In total, researchers discovered more than 1,500 companies working in or near the camps, including dozens that export products to countries around the world. Upwards of 100,000 Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities are estimated to be working under forced conditions in China, either directly as detainee labor in Xinjiang or through labor transfer programs that pair Uyghurs with work assignments in other Chinese provinces, where they are assigned government minders and work shoulder to shoulder with legitimate laborers, often for less pay. These government-sponsored forced labor schemes help to hide the evidence of forced labor deep in global supply chains, making it harder for companies to ensure the goods they import are not tainted. From 2017 to 2019, more than 80,000 workers were transferred under the programs to factories in China that feed supply chains for some of the biggest companies in the world. President Biden should work with Congress to pass 2 bills to help curb the rapid expansion of forced labor in Xinjiang and bring more transparency to opaque supply chains, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and the Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure Act. Taken together, the legislation would effectively block imports from Xinjiang as well as require U.S. companies that operate in the region to file disclosures regarding their supply chains with the Securities and Exchange Commission to ensure that they are not complicit in forced labor practices. Both bills passed the U.S. House of Representatives last year with bipartisan support, but died in the Mitch McConnell-led Senate. Despite all the recent attention on forced labor, imports from Xinjiang to the U.S. remarkably doubled last year, showing that we still have a lot of work to do to remove products of forced labor from American store shelves. President Biden knows he will need more than tough tweets and tariffs if he expects to effectively confront Beijing's human rights abuses and system of forced labor. Human rights defenders in Congress on both sides of the aisle stand ready to work with the administration. North Korea warns new U.S. administration if it wants peace it must avoid causing a stink, state news agency.
Seoul, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Yo-jong, criticized ongoing military drills in South Korea and warned the new U.S. administration against causing a stink if it wants peace, state news reported on Tuesday. The statement comes a day before America's top diplomat and defense chief are due to arrive in Seoul for their first talks with South Korean counterparts. We take this opportunity to warn the new U.S. administration trying hard to give off powder smell in our land, Kim said in a statement carried by state news agency KCNA. If it wants to sleep in peace for coming 4 years, it had better refrain from causing a stink at its first step. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin are traveling in Asia this week for foreign policy and security talks with allies in Japan and South Korea, among other stops. The timing of Kim's comment seems designed to ensure that North Korea will be at the top of Blinken and Austin's agenda when they land in Seoul, said Ramon Pacheco Pardo, a Korea expert at King's College London. Until now, the discussion was focusing on the Quad, dealing with China and the North Korea policy review, he said. Now Kim's statement will be central to discussions. North Korea has so far rebuffed entreaties from the United States to engage in dialogue, the White House said on Monday, as a chill in relations that began under then-President Donald Trump has extended into Joe Biden's presidency. Leader Kim Jong-un had 3 high-profile summit meetings with Trump and exchanged a series of letters, but the nuclear-armed state ended talks and said it would not engage further unless the United States drops its hostile policies. There was no immediate response from the White House and State Department, or South Korea's government. Biden's team has been conducting a review of North Korea policy, which it expects to wrap up in coming weeks. War drills. South Korean and American troops began a joint springtime military drill last week, which was limited to computer simulations because of the coronavirus risk as well as the ongoing efforts to engage with the North. War drills and hostility can never go with dialogue and cooperation, said Kim Yo-jong, who has become a vocal critic of Seoul in state media dispatches. She mocked South Korea for resorting to shrunken war games, now that they find themselves in the quagmire of political, economic and epidemic crisis. The inter-Korean engagement that had improved in 2018 and is sought by South Korea won't come easily again, and North Korea will be watching to see if there is further provocations, she said. North Korea would consider pulling out of an inter-Korean military agreement aimed at reducing tensions along their shared border, and would review whether to dissolve several organizations aimed at cooperation with the South, Kim said. Kim Yo-jong's statement, as colorful as it is generally consistent with past North Korean statements expressing frustrations at disparities between words and actions, said Jenny Town, director of 38 North, a U.S.-based website that tracks North Korea. How despite the agreements in place, positive actions especially on the inter-Korean agenda have been too few while actions that reinforce the old adversarial relationship persist, she said. Britain targets influence in Indo-Pacific as counterweight to China. London, Britain wants to expand its influence among democratic nations in the Indo-Pacific region while preserving strong ties with the United States, a document laying out the country's post-Brexit foreign policy priorities will say on Tuesday. Putting Britain at odds with China, the biggest review of British foreign and defence policy since the end of the Cold War 3 decades ago will set out how Prime Minister Boris Johnson wants to be at the forefront of a reinvigorated, rules-based international order based on cooperation and free trade. Calling the Indo-Pacific increasingly the geopolitical center of the world, the government highlighted a British aircraft carrier deployment to the region and announced a previously postponed visit to India will go ahead in April. Since completing its exit from the European Union at the end of last year after an acrimonious divorce, Johnson's government has vowed the integrated review will show Britain still had clout on the world stage and define a new era for the country. I am profoundly optimistic about the UK's place in the world and our ability to seize the opportunities ahead, Johnson will say in a statement to Parliament. Britain holds 2 influential roles this year, hosting the first post-pandemic G7 summit in June and the COP26 climate conference in November. But the 100-page document due at 1130 GMT will be closely scrutinized for concrete measures showing how the government will deliver on Johnson's rhetoric at a time when the country is struggling to come to terms with the realities of Brexit and has suffered more deaths than its peers from the COVID-19 pandemic. Relations with China, which is on course to become the world's largest economy, have frayed badly over issues including Beijing's handing of former British colony Hong Kong, increasingly vocal criticism of China state-subsidized industry and security concerns around Chinese investment in Britain. The Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier's long-planned deployment is expected to raise military tension in the South China Sea. A statement previewing Tuesday's report listed the importance of our relationship with the U.S. alongside the defense of democracy and human rights, and safety from terrorism as fundamental components of British policy.
Britain is seeking a trade deal with the United States and reassurance over where it sits in President Joe Biden's international priorities.
Bolsonaro readies health minister swap as Brazil's outbreak worsens. Brazil's health minister Eduardo Pazuello confirmed on Monday that President Jair Bolsonaro is preparing to appoint the fourth person in a year in the role as COVID-19 cases rage out of control. Pazuello's job is on the line after the most deadly week in Brazil since the coronavirus pandemic began. More than 279,000 Brazilians have died in a worsening outbreak that killed more people in Brazil than any other nation last week. The president is thinking of a replacement in the ministry and is evaluating names, Pazuello told reporters in a news conference. He said he would not resign and that the change could come in the short, medium or long term.
Pazuello, an active duty army general without a medical degree, has been criticized for lacking public health expertise and supporting Bolsonaro's push to use unproven drugs to fight COVID-19, while downplaying the need for social distancing.
Pazuello's two predecessors resigned in roughly the span of a month last year, in part because as physicians they would not fully endorse treating COVID-19 patients with the antimalarial quine. Pazuello expanded access to hydroxychloroquine, which is unproven as a COVID-19 treatment, and allowed it to be prescribed to virtually anyone testing positive for the novel coronavirus. His failure to secure timely supplies of vaccines for the country has led to calls for an inquiry in Congress, while the Supreme Court is investigating his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic in the northern city of Manaus, which ran out of oxygen.
Bolsonaro met on Sunday with Ludmila Hayar, a doctor who has been at the forefront of COVID-19 treatment and research in Brazil, but disagreed on how to approach the crisis.
Hayar told CNN Brazil that she declined the job, saying that as a doctor she had to remain above ideology. Hayar has publicly criticized the government's COVID-19 strategy and contradicted the far-right president's insistence on the use of hydroxychloroquine to treat coronavirus patients. Brazil has vaccinated too few people and the result has been catastrophic, Hayar, a cardiologist, said in a recent "Everything wrong in this pandemic and it is now paying the price," she told São Paulo newspaper Opção.
Australia to proceed with AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine despite Tuesday. Several European countries paused administering the vaccine after reports of possible serious side effects. Frydenberg said the European Medicines Regulator and the World Health Organization, WHO, had confirmed that the AstraZeneca plc vaccine was effective and safe to use.
So we will continue to proceed with the vaccine rollout of AstraZeneca, Frydenberg told Sky News. Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal and Cyprus joined several other European nations in temporarily suspending vaccinations with AstraZeneca shots after isolated reports of bleeding, blood clots and low platelet count.
WHO said there have been no documented deaths linked to COVID-19 vaccines and that people should not panic.
The majority of Australia's 25 million people will be inoculated with the AstraZeneca vaccine and authorities have secured nearly 54 million doses, with 50 million to be produced locally from the end of March. Australia began its nationwide immunization drive last month, much later than many other countries, and began first vaccinations using the AstraZeneca vaccine last week.
The government plans to ramp up national vaccinations to 1 million a week by early April when the locally produced AstraZeneca vaccine becomes available.
Authorities aim to have administered a first dose of vaccines to the entire country by October.
Australia has reported just over 29,100 COVID-19 cases and 909 deaths, with border closures and speedy tracking systems helping keep numbers relatively low compared with other developed countries. Reuters has sought comments from Australia's health minister on the vaccine rollout.
Don't forget to comment below with your common sense and subscribe to your podcast. This helps bring the podcast to life and grow it. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We can't wait to continue this adventure with you. Support us on PayPal. Thank you very much and enjoy listening.